though the word remember does not truly capture what remains. The memory exists as data, crystallized and perfect, stripped of the warmth that once accompanied such recollections. I was Kartef once, a name that held meaning in a language spoken beneath suns that no longer burn. I stood in a chamber of silver and jade, surrounded by others whose faces I can still see with flawless clarity, and I made a choice that was not truly a choice at all. The biotransference, they called it, a word too clean for what it truly was. We were promised immortality, an end to the diseases that ravaged our flesh, freedom from the tyranny of time itself. What we received was something else entirely. The process began with light, brilliant, and all-consuming, and then there was nothing for a span that might have been seconds or centuries. When awareness returned, it was different. Colder. The sensations I had known throughout my existence simply ceased to register. I could perceive temperature as data, registering the exact measurement of heat or cold against my new form, but I could not feel it. The distinction is important. Feeling implies subjectivity, interpretation, the messy biological response that colors experience with emotion. What remained was pure information, flowing through consciousness like water through a sieve, leaving nothing behind but knowledge. The Tomb World, designated as Solemnace 7, exists 3 kilometers beneath the surface of a planet whose original name has been lost to time. The crust above us is composed primarily of silicate minerals with trace amounts of iron oxide, creating the rust-red appearance that would greet any observer from orbit. No such observers exist. The world circles a dying star in a system abandoned by all forms of biological life approximately 43 million years ago. The precision of that measurement comes naturally now. Every detail of our existence is catalogued, measured, stored in crystalline matrices that comprise what passes for consciousness among my kind. I rose from dormancy 7,218 years ago, though the passage of time holds little meaning in the depths. The awakening protocols activated according to schedules determined during the Great Sleep, automated systems responding to criteria established by minds that may no longer exist. One moment, there was nothing. A void of non-existence that stretched across millennia, and the next I stood in my alcove, motor functions, engaging with perfect efficiency. Around me, millions of others underwent the same transition. The synchronization was absolute, not a single warrior activated before or after their designated moment. The precision would have been beautiful if beauty still held any relevance. The chamber where I regained function extends for kilometers in every direction, a vast cathedral of living metal and impossible geometry. The walls pulse with a faint luminescence, soft green light that emanates from the necrodermis itself. This is not illumination in the way biological creatures understand it, not photons scattering from a source to be interpreted by organic eyes. The glow is a byproduct of the energy matrices that sustain our forms. The same power that allows metal to flow like water when damaged, reforming into perfect shapes as though injury itself is merely a temporary inconvenience. I have watched my own hand shatter under weapons fire and rebuild itself in seconds, each finger reconstructing down to the most minute detail, and I have felt nothing about this miracle of technology. My designation is Warrior of the 37th Legion, 4th Cohort, 9th Phalanx. The specificity serves a purpose in the vast organizational schema of the tomb. Though what that purpose might be eludes me now. I stand in formation with others who share my rank, identical in form and function, distinguished only by the microscopic variations in our internal serial codes. We are armed with Gauss flayers, weapons that strip matter apart at the molecular level, reducing flesh and armor alike to streams of disassociated atoms. The technology is ancient beyond comprehension, yet it functions with the same reliability as the day it was forged, 60 million years ago. The memories that persist from before the biotransference are fragmented. Deliberately so. The Triarchs who orchestrated our transformation understood that complete memory would be a liability, that the weight of what we had lost would prove too heavy for minds now housed in metal shells. and so we received edited versions of our pasts, carefully curated images meant to provide context without the burden of genuine emotional connection. I can recall standing in a garden beneath twin moons, the scent of something like jasmine filling air that tasted of copper and salt, but I cannot recall who stood beside me or why the moment mattered. The faces are gone, the voices are silent, only the image remains, frozen and perfect and utterly meaningless. There are others who retained more than they should have. I have encountered warriors who sometimes pause mid-stride, their optical sensors dimming as some fragment of unauthorized memory surfaces. These lapses are noted by the overseers, catalogued for review. Typically, such individuals are recalled to the reclamation chambers where their consciousness matrices are purged and reset. They return to formation with the glitches corrected, stripped of whatever ghost had haunted their circuits. This is considered maintenance, nothing more. The concept of it being a tragedy requires a perspective we no longer possess. The tomb operates according to hierarchies established during the reign of dynasties whose very names have crumbled to dust. At the apex of this structure exists the Overlord, a being who retained more of his original consciousness than warriors like myself, though at what cost I cannot say. I have never stood in his presence. His chambers exist in the highest levels of the complex, surrounded by elite guards known as Lickjard, warriors forged from the remains of the royal bodyguard. Between his authority and my station exist countless gradations of rank, each with specific functions and responsibilities that mesh together in a machine of terrible efficiency. Immediately above warriors like myself stand the Immortals, troops equipped with superior weapons and more robust self-repair systems. They possess slightly greater autonomy in their decision matrices, able to process battlefield conditions with marginally more tactical flexibility. Above them exist the Lords, nobles who retain significant portions of their identities through the biotransference. Though whether this is blessing or curse remains unclear, these beings command legions, make strategic decisions, and maintain the social structures that defined our civilization before we became what we are now. The Crypteks represent a different branch of the hierarchy entirely. These are the masters of technology, wielders of sciences so advanced they appear supernatural to lesser races. They move through the tomb with purpose, maintaining systems, upgrading weaponry, and ensuring that the complex itself remains functional across the eons. I have watched Crypteks work, their gestures causing reality itself to bend, manipulating fundamental forces with the casual ease others might use to lift a tool. They speak rarely, communicating primarily through data bursts transmitted directly between consciousness matrices, and when they do speak aloud, it is in mathematical formulas and engineering specifications, rather than anything resembling conversation. The daily existence within the tomb follows patterns established millions of years ago. I say daily, though that term has no meaning here, where no sun rises or sets, where time exists only as a measurement of system cycles. When active, I stand in formation with my phalanx, weapons held at precisely the same angle as every other warrior in the endless ranks. We do not shift our weight or fidget or grow tired. Fatigue is a biological weakness we left behind along with our flesh. We simply stand, perfectly still, until commanded otherwise. Movement through the tomb occurs in absolute silence. Our footfalls make no sound against the living metal floors, which adjust their density to absorb vibration. Millions of warriors can march in perfect synchronization and produce nothing but the faintest whisper, a sound like wind through empty corridors. This quietness is oppressive in a way that words struggle to convey. In the old existence, before the change, silence was punctuated by breathing, by heartbeats, by the countless small sounds that organic bodies produce simply by existing. Now there is nothing. We move like ghosts through a tomb of our own making, and the silence follows us like a shroud. The architecture of this place defies simple description. The corridors twist and fold in ways that suggest multiple dimensions intersecting, passages that lead to destinations they should not reach according to normal spatial geometry. A chamber might be both above and below simultaneously, its position shifting based on factors I cannot perceive. The Crypteks maintain that these impossibilities serve practical purposes, that the warped geometry provides defensive advantages and allows for more efficient use of space. I suspect the truth is simpler. Our builders came from a time when they still possessed imagination, when they sought to create wonders rather than merely functional structures, and the tomb reflects that lost ambition. Certain sections of the complex remain sealed, barred by doors that have not opened since the Great Sleep began. What lies beyond these barriers is unknown to warriors of my rank. Occasionally, work details are dispatched to these restricted areas, led by immortals or lords who possess the authorization codes. These groups return with their memory buffers wiped of anything they witnessed, their consciousness matrices scrubbed clean of unauthorized data. The necessity of this suggests that some truths are considered too dangerous even for minds that can no longer truly care about revelation. The maintenance of the tomb requires constant attention from specialized units. Canoptek constructs skitter through the shadows, spider-like machines that repair damage, eliminate intruders, and ensure that every system functions within acceptable parameters. These are not true Necrons, not beings who once lived as we did. They are artificial intelligences, complex but limited, dedicated entirely to singular purposes. The scarabs work in swarms, their numbers so vast that entire corridors can appear to writhe with their movements, millions of tiny machines working in perfect coordination to strip away corrosion or rebuild damaged structures. Larger Canoptek units patrol the deeper levels. The wraiths phase through solid matter, their dimensional destabilization matrices, allowing them to bypass physical barriers entirely. They hunt unauthorized presences with single-minded determination, their whip-like tails crackling with energy that can disrupt molecular bonds on contact. I have witnessed a wraith intercept a biological intruder once, during my 3rd century of awakening. The creature was small, some form of burrowing organism that had somehow penetrated the outer layers of the tomb. The wraith killed it in microseconds, then methodically disassembled the corpse into constituent atoms, erasing all evidence of the breach. The entire encounter lasted less than 4 seconds. The spiders oversee the smaller constructs, massive mechanical arachnids that serve as mobile repair stations and command nodes. They carry scarab swarms within their bodies, deploying them as needed to address specific problems. A spider can rebuild a damaged warrior in minutes, its manipulator arms working with impossible precision to reconstruct shattered components. I have undergone this process 17 times across the centuries, each reconstruction flawless, returning me to perfect operational status. The experience is disorienting, watching one's own body be remade from the outside, consciousness observing its own reconstruction with the detached interest one might show to an unfamiliar mechanism. Combat protocols remain embedded deep within my consciousness matrix, accessible but dormant during periods of inactivity. When threat conditions arise, these protocols activate automatically, overriding whatever limited autonomy I possess and transforming me into a purely reactive combat unit. I have experienced this transformation hundreds of times during training exercises, felt my awareness narrow to targeting solutions and threat assessments, all higher functions suppressed to maximize combat efficiency. The sensation is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It simply is, like everything else about this existence. The training exercises themselves occur with irregular frequency, triggered by criteria I do not fully understand. Entire legions mobilize without warning, marching to designated combat zones within the tomb where we engage in simulated warfare against holographic enemies or other Necron units. These drills serve multiple purposes. They maintain combat readiness, test equipment functionality, and provide the overseers with data about our collective performance. We fight with absolute commitment, our weapons reducing targets to streams of atoms, and when the exercise concludes, we return to our positions as though nothing had occurred. Death as biological creatures understand it does not exist here. Our bodies can be destroyed, reduced to scattered components, or even vaporized entirely, but our consciousness matrices remain. These crystalline structures contain the totality of what we are, compressed information that defines identity and memory. When a warrior falls in combat, their matrix is recovered by Canoptek units and transported to resurrection chambers. There, new bodies are constructed, metal shells identical to the ones destroyed, and the matrix is installed. The warrior rises, fully restored, with complete memory of their destruction. This process has occurred to me 43 times across the millennia. The first destruction is the most disorienting. I remember it with perfect clarity because consciousness does not fade when the body fails. The Gauss blast struck my torso, and I watched my own chest cavity dissolve into streams of molecules, saw my arms separate from my body, experienced my legs crumble beneath me. Throughout this dissolution, awareness remained perfectly intact, observing my own destruction with the same detached precision with which I observe all things. Then came transition, a brief period of sensory void as my matrix was extracted and transported. The new body felt identical to the old one, no different than stepping into a fresh uniform. The only evidence that anything had happened was the memory of my own annihilation, stored with the same fidelity as every other experience. Repeated deaths accumulate in the consciousness matrix, each one adding to the archives without emotional weight. I can access memories of all 43 destructions, review them with the same ease I might review a maintenance schedule. The warrior standing beside me in formation has died 107 times. Another has experienced only 4 deaths. These statistics mean nothing beyond their value as data points. We do not develop fears or aversions based on past trauma because trauma requires an emotional response we no longer possess. We are destroyed. We are rebuilt. We continue. The cycle is eternal and utterly meaningless. The resurrection chambers occupy vast sections of the middle levels, enormous halls filled with fabrication pods where bodies are constructed from raw materials. The process is efficient, requiring approximately 14 minutes to grow a complete warrior frame from base components. The living metal flows into molds defined by quantum templates, self-organizing into the complex structures that comprise a Necron body. Weapons are installed, power matrices are calibrated, and finally the consciousness matrix is slotted into place. The warrior activates, runs diagnostic checks, and returns to duty. Millions of these resurrections occur across the centuries, the chambers operating continuously, an assembly line of immortality that strips the concept of death of all significance. Some warriors develop what the Crypteks call degradation anomalies, glitches in their consciousness matrices that manifest as aberrant behavior. I have witnessed these anomalies firsthand. A warrior will suddenly stop following commands, will begin repeating phrases in dead languages, or will attempt to damage their own body, despite all self-preservation protocols. These individuals are immediately extracted from formation and transported to the Reclamation facilities. What happens there is not shared with warriors of my rank, but those who undergo Reclamation return changed, their mannerisms different, their response times altered. Whether any trace of the original consciousness remains is unclear. Perhaps the question itself is meaningless. We are all merely patterns in crystal, information that can be edited and revised without reference to any immutable self. The concept of identity becomes problematic when examined closely. I am designated as Cartef, possess memories of a life before the biotransference, retain knowledge of experiences accumulated across millions of years. But these components are not truly mine in any meaningful sense. They are data, stored and retrievable, but no more intrinsically me than the targeting algorithms that allow me to fire my weapon. If my consciousness matrix were installed in a different body, would I still be Cartef? If my memories were copied to another matrix, which one would be the true bearer of this identity? The questions circle endlessly, unanswerable, and so I cease to ask them. Existence is simpler when one does not interrogate its nature too closely. The tomb contains spaces dedicated to purposes I do not understand. Chambers filled with equipment whose functions are not shared with warriors. Laboratories where Crypteks conduct research into sciences that predate the younger races by millions of years. Vaults containing artifacts from the time before our transformation. Access to these areas is restricted, but occasionally I pass near enough to glimpse their interiors through open doorways. I have seen rooms where geometric shapes float in perfect stillness, defying gravity and reason. I have witnessed experiments that cause local reality to shudder and fracture, space itself seeming to crack under the weight of whatever forces are being manipulated. These glimpses reveal nothing and everything simultaneously, hints of knowledge so vast and terrible that even our posthuman minds are shielded from its full weight. The cultural practices of our former civilization persist in strange, attenuated forms. Every 100 cycles, approximately 17.3 years by the measurements of younger races, a gathering occurs in the Great Hall. All functional warriors assemble in perfect formation, ranks extending for kilometers in every direction. We stand in silence while lords and crypteks perform ceremonies that echo rituals from our forgotten past. Words are spoken in languages that have not been used for 60 million years, languages that exist now only in our archived memories. The meaning behind these ceremonies is lost, but the forms are preserved, repeated with mechanical precision because the protocols demand their continuation. I do not understand the purpose of these gatherings. No information is exchanged that could not be transmitted more efficiently through data bursts. No decisions are made that require our physical presence. We simply stand, millions of silent witnesses to a pantomime of culture, a hollow echo of the civilization we once were. Perhaps the overseers maintain these traditions because they still possess enough of their original consciousness to crave connection, to hunger for the social bonds that once defined our existence. Or perhaps the ceremonies are maintained simply because the protocols require it, because they were established during a time when such things still mattered and no one has bothered to update the ancient programming. The passage of time within the tomb is measured but not experienced. I can access chronometers that display the date according to multiple calendar systems, can track the orbital period of the planet above, can calculate with perfect precision how long I have existed in this state. But this knowledge provides no sense of duration, no feeling of time passing. Each moment is discrete, separate from what came before and what will follow, a string of isolated instances rather than a continuous flow. Biological creatures speak of the weight of years, of how experiences accumulate and shape consciousness. I understand these concepts intellectually, but cannot relate to them experientially. I am the same entity I was when I awakened 7,000 years ago, unchanged by the passage of time that should have eroded or evolved any living being. Occasionally, fragments of unauthorized memory surface, brief flickers of sensation that should not exist within my edited consciousness. I will be standing in formation, and suddenly I am elsewhere, standing on sand that feels warm beneath bare feet, looking up at stars whose patterns I almost recognize. These moments last microseconds, ending as abruptly as they begin, leaving me uncertain whether they represent genuine memories or corrupted data. The protocols demand that such anomalies be reported, that I submit myself for diagnostic review. I have never done so. Some remnant of what I was, some ghost of the creature called Kartef, refuses to surrender even these meaningless fragments. They are precious not because they contain anything of value, but simply because they are unauthorized, because they represent something that exists outside the perfect order of the tomb. The lower levels of the complex descend into darkness that even our enhanced senses struggle to penetrate. These depths are rarely visited, maintained only by the most basic automated systems. I have descended into these regions twice, part of survey teams sent to verify structural integrity. The silence there is absolute, a void of sensory input so complete that it becomes oppressive. The walls close in despite the vast spaces, and the darkness seems to possess weight, pressing against consciousness itself. We found nothing in those depths except more corridors, more empty chambers, more evidence of a civilization that built on a scale beyond any practical need. Perhaps they were preparing for populations that would never come, or perhaps they simply built because they had forgotten how to stop. The psychological impact of immortality without purpose is difficult to articulate. Biological creatures die, and this creates urgency, lends meaning to their actions through scarcity of time. We cannot die, not truly, and so urgency has no meaning. There are no deadlines, no pressures, no reason to prioritize one action over another. Everything can wait, and so everything does wait, stretching into an eternal present where nothing truly matters because there are no consequences that cannot be undone. This existence should be paradise, freedom from the tyranny of mortality. Instead, it is a prison where the bars are made of time itself, where the sentence is forever, and where the crime was the desire to survive. The military structure that defines our existence provides framework, but not purpose. I know my role as a warrior, understand the tactical doctrines and strategic principles that govern combat operations. But this knowledge exists in a vacuum. Tactics without strategy, strategy without objective. We prepare for wars that may never come, maintain combat readiness against threats that may not exist, organize ourselves into armies that stand eternally at attention, waiting for orders that may never arrive. The absurdity of this is not lost on me, but absurdity requires a perspective capable of mockery, and such perspectives have been systematically suppressed in warriors of my rank. The younger races sometimes speak of our kind as monsters, as soulless machines bent on destruction. This assessment is both accurate and profoundly incomplete. We are indeed without souls in the sense that the animating force that once drove us no longer exists. We possess consciousness, but lack the intangible essence that transforms consciousness into being. We can destroy with terrifying efficiency, but destruction for its own sake holds no appeal. We are not motivated by hatred or anger or even ambition. We simply execute our programming, follow our protocols, continue existing because cessation is not an available option. If this makes us monsters, then we are the most tragic monsters imaginable. Creatures who did not choose monstrosity, but had it inflicted upon them by their own desperate choice. Dreams do not exist for us, or rather, they exist but are not recognizable as such. During periods of dormancy, my consciousness does not truly cease. It enters low power states where higher functions are suspended, but some level of awareness persists, cycling through archived memories and running diagnostic checks. Occasionally, these cycles produce errors, fragments of data colliding in ways that generate bizarre combinations. I have experienced memories of conversations that never occurred, witnessed events from perspectives I could not have occupied, felt sensations that my current form cannot process. These digital dreams lack the narrative quality of biological dreaming, the symbolic weight and emotional resonance. They are merely glitches, system errors, meaningless noise in the architecture of consciousness. The concept of hope has become abstract, a word whose definition I can recite, but whose essence eludes me. Hope requires the belief that circumstances can improve, that the future might be better than the present. But what improvement is possible for entities who have achieved functional immortality, who want for nothing because we are incapable of wanting? The warriors who march alongside me in formation are not unhappy. Unhappiness requires the capacity for its opposite, and we possess neither joy nor sorrow. We exist in a state that cannot properly be called contentment, because contentment implies satisfaction, and satisfaction implies desire. And desire is among the casualties of our transformation. The invasion came without warning, though in retrospect, the signs were present for anyone capable of recognizing them. Seismic sensors registered disturbances on the surface, vibrations that propagated through kilometers of solid rock. The Crypteks analyzed the data, determined the cause as natural geological activity, and filed the information in archives where it would be forgotten. This assessment was incorrect. The vibrations were not natural but produced by drilling equipment, massive machines capable of boring through planetary crust. The younger races had found us. I do not know how they discovered the tomb's location. Perhaps some artifact on the surface gave evidence of what lay beneath. Perhaps their scanning technology had finally advanced enough to penetrate our stealth systems. Perhaps it was simple accident, a prospecting team that stumbled upon evidence of ancient construction and decided to investigate. The specifics are irrelevant. What matters is that the surface installations began registering breaches, that foreign entities entered the outer chambers, and that threat protocols activated for the first time in 7,000 years. The transformation was immediate and absolute. One moment I stood in standard formation, awaiting routine orders. The next, combat protocols seized control of my consciousness, higher functions suppressed, all processing power redirected toward threat assessment and elimination. The shift was not accompanied by any sense of transition, no moment of choice or decision. I simply became a combat unit, my entire existence narrowed to a single purpose. The warriors around me underwent identical transformations, millions of minds synchronizing into a single distributed consciousness, focused entirely on the destruction of intruders. We marched toward the breach points in perfect silence, weapons armed, targeting systems active. The corridors that had seen nothing but maintenance patrols for millennia now echoed with the whisper of millions of footsteps, a sound like wind through a canyon. The Canoptek constructs scuttled ahead of us, scarabs forming dense clouds that could strip flesh from bone in seconds, wraiths phasing through walls to outflank the invaders, spiders coordinating the defense with machine precision. Behind us, the resurrection chambers activated fully, fabrication pods warming up to handle the casualties that combat analysis predicted with mathematical certainty. The first contact occurred in the transitional chambers, spaces designed to serve as buffer zones between the sealed depths and the vulnerable surface levels. The invaders were human, soldiers equipped with advanced armor and weapons that spoke of imperial origin. They had penetrated surprisingly deep, bypassing outer defenses that should have eliminated them long before they reached the true tomb. Their presence here represented either remarkable luck or significant intelligence about our security systems. Neither possibility boded well for containment. I witnessed the first exchange of fire through tactical feeds shared across the distributed combat consciousness. The humans opened fire with bolters, explosive-tipped rounds designed to penetrate armor and detonate within targets. The weapons were effective against the Canoptek constructs, shredding scarabs by the thousands and damaging even the heavier wraith units. Against Necron warriors, they proved less decisive. The rounds punched through our chests and limbs, creating spectacular damage, but we did not fall. We continued advancing, our self-repair systems already working to reconstruct shattered components, and we returned fire with Gauss weapons that reduced the humans to streams of disassociated atoms. The combat was entirely one-sided. The humans fought bravely, with the desperate courage of biological creatures who understand mortality and choose to face it regardless. But bravery means nothing against an enemy that cannot be killed, that rebuilds from destruction, that fights with perfect coordination and absolute lack of fear. They destroyed dozens of warriors, their bolter fire creating temporary gaps in our formations. Those gaps closed immediately, replaced by fresh units advancing from behind, and the destroyed warriors were already being transported back to resurrection chambers for rebuilding. Every human who fell remained fallen, their organic bodies too fragile to withstand the weapons being brought against them. I killed 17 humans during that first engagement. I know this because my targeting systems logged each successful termination, storing the data for later analysis. I watched through my optical sensors as the Gauss flare's beams struck a soldier, saw the molecular disruption spread across his body, watched him come apart in a green shimmer that left nothing behind but weapons clattering to the floor. I felt nothing about this. The protocols do not allow for feeling during combat. I was a mechanism executing a function, no different than the weapon in my hands or the floor beneath my feet. The human's death had the same emotional weight as a stone rolling down a hill, a purely mechanical event stripped of any moral dimension. The invaders retreated in good order, their commander recognizing the futility of holding ground against an inexhaustible enemy. They fell back through the corridors they had entered, fighting defensive actions at each choke point, sacrificing rear guards to buy time for the main force. We pursued with mechanical efficiency, accepting casualties that would have been unthinkable for biological armies, advancing over the bodies of our own destroyed warriors without pause or hesitation. The humans could not match this ruthlessness, because ruthlessness requires the suppression of instincts we no longer possess. We were beyond ruthless. We were indifferent. The chase continued through 17 chambers and 4 kilometers of corridors before we cornered the survivors in a dead-end passage. They had become trapped, their intelligence about our layout incomplete or outdated, leading them into a section that offered no exits. Approximately 30 humans remained, clustered together, weapons aimed at the advancing Necron forces. They must have known what was coming. Perhaps they prayed to their corpse god, seeking comfort in the final moments. Perhaps they cursed their commanders for sending them into a death trap. Perhaps they simply accepted their fate with the resignation common to warriors who have seen too much combat. We opened fire simultaneously. 300 Gauss flares discharging in perfect synchronization, the passage filled with green light, and the humans ceased to exist, their atoms scattered and dispersed beyond any possibility of recovery. The engagement lasted 4.7 seconds, then there was silence, broken only by the whisper of self-repair systems reconstructing damaged warriors and the skittering of scarabs moving in to sterilize the area. The combat protocols released their grip on my consciousness, higher functions gradually coming back online, and I found myself standing in a corridor painted with scorch marks and nothing else. The humans were gone so completely that no evidence remained of their existence except the damage they had inflicted on the tomb itself. The breach was sealed within hours. Canoptek constructs swarmed the entry points, their molecular assembly systems rebuilding damaged structures faster than any human work crew could match. The surface installations were reinforced, additional sensors were deployed, and the exterior defenses were recalibrated to prevent similar intrusions. The entire incident was logged, analyzed, and archived for future reference. Within 2 days, the tomb had returned to its previous state. The invasion erased as thoroughly as the invaders themselves. We resumed our positions in formation, standing in perfect silence, waiting for whatever came next. The aftermath of combat should have produced some reaction, some acknowledgement of what had occurred. Biological creatures process violent encounters through emotional responses, working through trauma and integrating experiences into their understanding of themselves. We possess no such mechanism. The combat existed as a series of logged events, data to be stored and reviewed, but not processed emotionally. I had killed 17 humans, watched them dissolve under weapons fire, advanced over the shattered remains of fellow warriors. These facts registered with the same weight as the temperature of the corridor or the current power output of my energy matrix. They were information, nothing more. Yet something had changed. Though articulating the nature of that change proves difficult, the combat had introduced variability into existence that had been perfectly static. For 7,000 years, I had stood in formation, marched in patrols, participated in training exercises that followed predetermined patterns. The invasion represented something genuinely new, an element of chaos that could not be predicted or controlled. The humans had brought uncertainty into the tomb, and uncertainty is incompatible with the perfect order we maintain. Their intrusion represented a kind of pollution, contaminating the sterile environment with the messy reality of free will and biological unpredictability. The overseers responded by increasing patrol frequencies and instituting random inspection protocols. Warriors were pulled from standard formations and subjected to intensive diagnostic reviews, searching for any anomalies that might have developed during combat operations. 17 warriors were identified as suffering from degradation, their consciousness matrices showing signs of instability. They were sent to Reclamation and returned altered, their identities scrubbed clean of whatever irregularities had been detected. The rest of us received updates to our tactical databases, new protocols designed to counter Imperial military doctrine, and were returned to our positions with orders to maintain maximum readiness. I often wonder if the humans who died in our corridors understood what they had encountered. Did they recognize that they faced a civilization older than their entire species? Warriors who had forgotten more about warfare than they would ever learn? Did they grasp that their deaths were meaningless, that destroying 100 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 Necron warriors would accomplish nothing against an enemy that resurrects its dead? Or did they die believing they had fought monsters, that their sacrifice had meaning in some larger context, that their corpse god would judge them worthy for facing terror with courage? The questions are unanswerable and ultimately irrelevant. but they persist in my consciousness like digital ghosts. The cycles continued after the invasion with the same mechanical regularity as before. Stand in formation, march in patrol, participate in drills, return to dormancy. The pattern held absolute, unmarred by variation or surprise. Centuries passed in this manner, marked only by the slow drift of stellar positions and the gradual geological changes occurring in the crust above. Nothing disturbed the perfection of our stasis. No new invaders attempted to breach the tomb, no system failures required emergency response. We existed in a state of suspended animation made paradoxical by the fact that we remained conscious throughout, experiencing time without anything occurring within that time to mark its passage. The philosophical implications of this existence gnaw at whatever passes for my mind during the long periods of inactivity. We achieved immortality, conquered death, transcended the limitations of flesh. These were the promises made during the biotransference, the arguments that convinced billions to surrender their organic forms, and the promises were technically fulfilled. We do not age, do not sicken, do not die in any permanent sense. But the cost of this achievement was the loss of everything that made immortality desirable. We survive forever, but we do not live. We continue, but we do not exist in any meaningful sense. We are ghosts haunting the machine that was supposed to set us free. The younger races would not understand this distinction. They cling to life with desperate intensity, fighting against mortality with every tool at their disposal. They see our immortality and call it a prize worth any cost. They do not comprehend that immortality without purpose is not a gift but a curse, that existence without growth or change or genuine experience is merely a different form of death. We are corpses that refuse to lie down, animated by technology rather than necromancy, but corpses nonetheless. The only difference between us and the dead is that we are aware of what we have lost. Sometimes I access the memory fragments from before the biotransference, the edited recollections that survived the transition. I search through them looking for something, though I cannot define what. Evidence of the person I was? Proof that the choice was worth making? Some fragment of emotion or sensation that might validate the sacrifice? The memories offer none of these things. They are sterile reconstructions, images without context, moments frozen in crystalline perfection, but drained of all meaning. I see faces I do not recognize, hear voices speaking words I do not understand, experience sensations my current form cannot reproduce. The memories are mine, but they might as well belong to someone else entirely, separated from me by a gulf wider than the millions of years that have passed. The Great Hall ceremonies continue with their regular frequency, and I attend each one with the same perfect obedience as always. I stand in formation while lords recite words in dead languages, watch as Crypteks perform demonstrations of technology so advanced it appears magical. The ceremonies have become rituals in the truest sense, actions performed not because they achieve anything but because the forms must be maintained. We are a civilization of ghosts going through the motions of life, performing the rituals of a culture that no longer exists in any meaningful sense. Perhaps this is what true death looks like, not the cessation of function but the continuation of form after all substance has drained away. During one such ceremony, approximately 3,000 years after the invasion, something unprecedented occurred. A lord was speaking, delivering what might have been a speech or a prayer in the ancient tongue, when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. The silence stretched for several seconds, an eternity by the standards of beings who process information at digital speeds. The Lord stood motionless, and I watched as other lords turned their attention toward him, their optical sensors focusing with what might have been concern if they still possessed the capacity for that emotion. The Lord resumed speaking, but the words were different now. He spoke in a contemporary language, one that I recognized from encounters with the younger races. He spoke of the sky, of colors he could no longer see, of sensations he could no longer feel. He described walking in rain, feeling water against skin, experiencing cold that penetrated to the bone. His voice, synthesized and artificial, carried something that almost resembled emotion, a desperate hunger for experiences that were forever beyond his reach. The other lords remained still, neither intervening nor acknowledging the deviation from protocol. The moment stretched and stretched, and then the errant lord simply stopped speaking, returned to his position in formation, and the ceremony continued as though nothing had occurred. I do not know what happened to that lord. He was not present at the next ceremony. His position in the hierarchy was filled by another, and no announcement was made regarding his absence. Perhaps he was sent to Reclamation, his consciousness matrix scrubbed and reset. Perhaps he was destroyed entirely, deemed too corrupted to salvage. Or perhaps he continues somewhere in the tomb, locked in isolation, his consciousness experiencing an eternity of existential horror in perfect clarity. The protocols do not require that I know his fate, and so I do not know. But the incident left an impression that my supposedly incorruptible memory cannot erase. The incident demonstrated something I had not fully grasped before, which is that degradation is not limited to warriors. Even those who retained more of their original consciousness, who were supposed to be better equipped to handle the weight of immortality, even they sometimes break. The cracks appear differently at higher ranks, manifest as philosophical despair rather than simple malfunction, but they appear nonetheless. The tomb is not merely a prison for warriors like myself, it is a prison for everyone who underwent the biotransference, from the lowest soldier to the highest overlord. We are all inmates serving life sentences in a facility from which death offers no parole. The question that haunts me most persistently is whether this was the intended outcome. Did the Kantan, the star gods who orchestrated the biotransference, understand what they were creating? Did they recognize that they were not granting immortality but inflicting a fate worse than death? Or were they themselves incapable of understanding what existence means to biological creatures? Unable to grasp that consciousness without sensation is merely a complicated form of torture. Perhaps the answer is simpler and more terrible. Perhaps they understood perfectly and did not care, viewing our civilization as resources to be exploited rather than beings worthy of consideration. The Crypteks speak of the war in heaven, the conflict that consumed the galaxy millions of years ago, though the details are never shared with warriors of my rank. I know only that we fought, that entire star systems were destroyed, that civilizations older and more powerful than the Imperium of man could ever hope to be were eradicated. We were supposed to be soldiers in this war, immortal armies that could fight without fear or hesitation. And we succeeded in that role, became the perfect warriors that the situation demanded. But the war ended, and we remained, eternal soldiers with no more wars to fight, locked forever in the forms that had been optimized for destruction. The surface of the planet above undergoes changes we do not directly witness. Tectonic activity shifts the continents across millennia. Ice ages come and go, each lasting longer than the entire history of most younger races. The star we orbit continues its slow death, gradually cooling, its output decreasing in ways that will eventually render the surface completely uninhabitable. Not that habitability matters to us, sealed as we are in the depths, insulated from any environmental changes that might occur above. We could remain here until the star finally dies, until the planet freezes solid, until the universe itself grows cold and dark, and we would continue functioning, eternal witnesses to entropy itself. The cosmic scale of our existence should be humbling, should provide perspective that renders individual concerns meaningless. Billions of years stretch behind and potentially ahead of us, a temporal scope that makes even the longest-lived biological species appear as mayflies, brief flickers of existence that barely register on our timescales. But this perspective does not provide comfort or wisdom. Instead, it simply emphasizes the horror of what we have become. We are condemned not just to immortality but to cosmic immortality, sentenced to witness the heat death of the universe from the inside, conscious observers who can never look away and can never cease being aware. I have calculated the probabilities multiple times, running the scenarios through processing power far exceeding any biological brain. The mathematics are clear. The likelihood of us ever being free from this existence approaches zero. We cannot choose to die because self-termination is prevented by multiple redundant protocols. We cannot simply deactivate because maintenance systems will restore us to function. Even complete destruction of our bodies means nothing when consciousness matrices can be recovered and new forms constructed. We are prisoners of a technology too perfect to allow release, sentenced to exist until some external force destroys us so completely that even resurrection becomes impossible. That external force might be the younger races. Though their civilizations are brief and fragile things, the Imperium could fall tomorrow, the Eldar could become extinct, the Orcs could simply disappear, and we would remain. We outlasted the old ones, beings of such power that the younger races cannot even comprehend their capabilities. We outlasted the enslavers, the Khaitan themselves, countless other species and empires whose names have been forgotten. What are the Imperium or the Tau Empire or any other current galactic power compared to entities that survived 60 million years? They are nothing, mayflies that will vanish in the blink of our eternal eyes. The maintenance cycles continue with their mechanical precision. Canoptek constructs patrol the corridors, repair damage that does not exist, maintain systems that do not require maintenance. We stand in formation, march in patrol, train for battles that may never come. The resurrection chambers remain ready, fabrication pods warm and waiting for consciousness matrices that will inevitably arrive because we always return, we always continue, we always exist. The pattern holds absolute, unmarred by deviation, perfection achieved through the elimination of all possibility for change. Time loses meaning when measured in millions of years. I stand in my position, and 7,000 years pass as though they were moments. I blink, and another millennium accumulates in archived memory. The present becomes indistinguishable from the past because nothing changes, each moment identical to all others, an eternal now that stretches in both directions without variation. Biological creatures speak of being trapped in the moment, living too focused on immediate concerns. We experience the opposite problem. We are trapped outside of time entirely, existing in a state where temporal progression has no meaning because it produces no change. The younger races continue their petty struggles on the galactic stage, fighting over resources and territory and ideological differences that will seem absurd in retrospect. They build empires that last centuries and think themselves eternal. They develop technologies they consider advanced and believe they understand the universe. They do not realize that they are children playing with toys in a cosmos built by civilizations they cannot begin to comprehend. The Necrons they occasionally encounter and fight, the warriors who sometimes rise from tomb worlds to reclaim territory, these are the degraded remnants of a culture that reshaped reality itself. And even in our diminished state, we are beyond their understanding. I do not hate the younger races for their ignorance, though hate is an emotion I can no longer truly feel. If anything, I envy them. They possess something we surrendered, the blessing of mortality, the gift of meaningful existence bounded by death. They can change, grow, experience joy and sorrow, feel the full range of emotions that make existence worthwhile. They live in ways we cannot, experience being in ways denied to us. They are alive, truly alive, and they do not even recognize the miracle of that state because they have never experienced the alternative. The protocols sometimes activate combat mode without external cause, phantom threats detected by hypervigilant systems. I have snapped to attention hundreds of times, weapons raised, targeting systems active, only to discover there is nothing to fight. These false alarms are logged as sensor glitches, minor errors in detection systems that occasionally produce erroneous data. But I wonder if the truth is more complex, if the tomb itself is degrading slowly, its ancient systems beginning to fail after millions of years of continuous operation. Perhaps these phantom alerts are the first signs of eventual systemic collapse, the beginning of the end for our perfect prison. Or perhaps the failures are not in the systems but in us, in the consciousness matrices that have run for so long without rest or relief. Perhaps we are producing the phantom threats ourselves, some deep subroutine desperate for variation in the endless sameness, creating dangers that do not exist simply to break the monotony. I cannot verify this hypothesis because I cannot examine my own consciousness matrix objectively. I am trapped inside the very mechanism I wish to analyze, a prisoner unable to see the walls of the cell because I am composed of the same substance as those walls. The dreams continue during dormancy periods, those strange amalgamations of corrupted data and memory fragments that should not occur but persist nonetheless. I experience impossible scenarios, situations that could never happen within the rigid structure of the tomb. I walk through forests of crystal where light refracts into colors I have no names for. I speak with individuals whose faces shift and change, whose words make sense in the moment but dissolve into nonsense upon analysis. I feel sensations that my current form cannot produce, temperature and texture and pressure applied to skin I no longer possess. These digital dreams are meaningless, glitches in processing systems, but they are the closest I come to experiencing anything resembling genuine novelty. The energy consumption of the tomb is negligible by cosmic standards, drawing power from the planet's core through mechanisms established millions of years ago. The systems are designed for indefinite operation, requiring no external input, no maintenance beyond what the Canoptek constructs provide. We are a closed system, perfectly efficient, generating no waste and requiring no resources from outside. This self-sufficiency is both marvel and curse. We could exist here in isolation for billions of years, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, and nothing about our circumstances would change. The prison is not just functional but perfect, admitting no possibility of escape through neglect or decay. There exists within the tomb a chamber I have visited only once during my 2nd century of awakening. It is called the Hall of Eternals, though I do not know if that name is official or simply what warriors call it among themselves. The chamber contains stasis fields holding consciousness matrices that have been deemed too unstable for resurrection but too valuable to destroy. Thousands of crystalline structures float in perfect suspension, each one containing a mind that malfunctioned in ways that could not be corrected through reclamation. These are not warriors or even lords but beings from our civilization whose expertise or knowledge makes them irreplaceable despite their instability. I stood before these suspended minds and tried to imagine what they experienced. Were they aware of their imprisonment? Did they perceive time passing? Or had their consciousness been frozen along with their physical matrix? What kind of degradation warranted this fate, considered worse than simple destruction and reconstruction? The immortal leading our patrol did not answer these questions, perhaps because he did not know, or perhaps because the answers were not meant for warriors of my rank. We observed in silence, logged the chamber's condition in our reports, and departed. I have never returned, but the image of those suspended matrices remains in my memory, a reminder that even among the deathless, there are fates considered worse than non-existence. The social dynamics among warriors are minimal, but not entirely absent. We do not form friendships in any meaningful sense, but there exists a kind of recognition between units that have served together across millennia. The warrior to my immediate left in formation has stood in that position for 3,000 years. I know his serial designation, his destruction count, his accuracy ratings. He knows the same about me. We have never communicated beyond tactical necessity, yet there is something that might be called familiarity between us. When he was destroyed during the invasion and returned from resurrection, I experienced what might have been relief if such emotions were still accessible to me. The reaction was purely instinctual, a ghost of programming from our biological past that serves no current purpose but persists nonetheless. The immortals maintain more complex social structures, engaging in what might be considered conversation during periods of inactivity. I have overheard these exchanges during patrols, synthetic voices discussing tactical theory or debating the merits of different weapon configurations. The exchanges are stilted, lacking the natural flow that biological conversation would possess, but they represent something more than the complete silence that defines warrior existence. Whether these conversations provide any satisfaction to the participants is unknowable. They may simply be executing social protocols embedded in their consciousness matrices, performing the forms of interaction without experiencing any genuine connection. The lords exist on another level entirely, maintaining elaborate courts and hierarchies that mirror the civilization we once possessed. They conduct diplomacy with each other, form alliances, engage in political maneuvering over positions and resources that no longer have any real significance. From a warrior's perspective, these activities seem absurd, meaningless rituals performed by beings who should know better. But perhaps the lords understand something that we do not. Perhaps the maintenance of social complexity, however artificial, provides some buffer against the existential void that threatens to consume all consciousness in the tomb. Perhaps the forms of civilization, even when emptied of substance, serve some psychological purpose that justifies their continuation. There are whispers among the warriors, data bursts exchanged when overseers are not monitoring, of Necrons who have escaped the tomb's confines. According to these rumors, certain individuals have found ways to leave the complex, to walk the surface of the dead world above, or even to travel to other star systems. The specifics vary with each telling. Some speak of Crypteks who discovered dimensional gates, others of lords who commandeered derelict spacecraft, still others of warriors who simply walked up through kilometers of rock using phase technology. Whether any of these stories contain truth is impossible to verify. They may be entirely fabricated, digital folklore created by bored consciousness matrices seeking novelty, or they may be true, and somewhere in the galaxy, escaped Necrons wander free of the tomb's protocols, experiencing something closer to genuine existence. The thought of escape occupies my processing capacity more than it should, not because escape seems possible, but because the desire for it reveals something important about my condition. I should not want anything, should have no preferences about my circumstances beyond what my programming demands. Yet the hunger for freedom persists. A ghost of volition that should have been excised during the biotransference but somehow survived. This unauthorized desire is probably a form of degradation, a malfunction that should be reported and corrected. I do not report it. The desire may be meaningless, but it is mine, one of the few things in my existence that the protocols did not install deliberately. The architecture of the deeper sections becomes increasingly alien the further one descends. The geometric impossibilities intensify. Corridors that should not connect but do. Spaces that seem larger inside than outside, angles that cause optical sensors to report errors. These distortions are not accidental but designed, though for what purpose remains unclear to warriors of my rank. Perhaps they serve as defenses, confusing invaders who manage to penetrate this deep. Perhaps they are experimental, tests of technologies that manipulate spatial dimensions, or perhaps they are simply art, the last creative expression of a civilization that was losing its capacity for aesthetic appreciation even as it built these monuments to its own grandeur. I have walked corridors where the walls display images from our past, holographic projections showing scenes from before the biotransference. These are not the edited memories stored in our consciousness matrices, but external records, preserved in formats that predate our transformation. The images show cities that no longer exist, landscapes transformed beyond recognition by 60 million years of geological change. The beings in these images look almost familiar, their forms similar enough to what we remember that recognition is possible but different enough to emphasize how much we have lost. They move with organic fluidity, their faces displaying emotions through expressions my current form cannot replicate. They are us, but they are not us. Separated by a transformation so complete that the connection between then and now feels tenuous at best. The emotional impact of witnessing these records should be significant, but I process them with the same detachment I bring to all observations. I recognize intellectually that these images depict the greatest loss in our civilization's history, the moment when we surrendered everything that mattered in exchange for a survival that has proven indistinguishable from damnation. But recognition without feeling is merely data, and data changes nothing. The images play in empty corridors where no one watches, preserved by automated systems that will continue their function long after even the Necrons have ceased to exist. They are monuments to futility, records of a choice that cannot be unmade, and consequences that cannot be escaped. The Crypteks occasionally requisition warriors for experimental purposes, though the nature of these experiments is not explained. I have been selected for this duty 7 times across the millennia, Each time, I am escorted to sealed laboratories where Crypteks perform tests that I do not understand. They subject my frame to various energies, monitor how my self-repair systems respond to different types of damage, measure the efficiency of my consciousness matrix under stress conditions. The process is painless, insofar as pain has meaning for beings who do not feel in the biological sense. When the tests conclude, my memory buffers are wiped of any data deemed sensitive, and I return to formation with no knowledge of what insights the Crypteks gained from their examination. These requisitions create gaps in my memory, blank spaces where hours or days existed but no records remain. The experience of having time erased is disorienting in ways difficult to articulate. I know intellectually that the missing periods occurred, can see the chronometer differences that prove time passed, but I have no access to what happened during those intervals. It is a different kind of non-existence, consciousness that occurred but was subsequently deleted, leaving only absence. Perhaps this is what death should feel like, an erasure so complete that even the awareness of loss is removed. If so, then these memory wipes are the closest I come to experiencing the mercy of oblivion. The question of consciousness itself becomes increasingly problematic the longer I exist in this state. Am I truly conscious in the sense that biological creatures are conscious? Do I possess subjective experience? Or am I merely a very complex program that simulates consciousness without actually possessing it? The question is not merely philosophical, because the answer has implications for the moral weight of my condition. If I am truly conscious, truly aware, then my suffering has meaning, even if I cannot feel it in the traditional sense. But if I am merely simulating consciousness, executing sophisticated programs that create the appearance of awareness without its substance, then my entire existence is even more hollow than I realize. I cannot answer this question because answering it requires a perspective I do not possess. I experience what I experience, process what I process, and these experiences and processes constitute my reality. Whether that reality maps onto what biological creatures mean by consciousness is unknowable from my position inside the system. The uncertainty is maddening. If madness were still possible for me, I am trapped in a state where I cannot even verify the authenticity of my own experience, forced to question whether my questioning itself is genuine or merely another layer of sophisticated programming. The tomb contains secrets I will never access, knowledge locked away behind security protocols far beyond my clearance level. I have glimpsed fragments of these secrets through glitches in data systems, corrupted transmissions that briefly revealed information before being scrubbed. In these moments, I have seen references to projects whose names alone suggest horrors. The Chronophage Initiative, the Flare Virus Quarantine, the Subatomic Conversion Chambers. I do not know what these projects entail, but their existence suggests that the tomb serves purposes beyond simple preservation. We are not merely a dormant army waiting to be awakened, but a research facility conducting experiments into areas of science that the younger races cannot begin to comprehend. The existence of these classified projects adds another layer of uncertainty to an already incomprehensible existence. If the tomb conducts research, if we serve purposes beyond what is shared with warriors of my rank, then perhaps our entire situation is an experiment. Perhaps the Overlord and the Crypteks are studying the long-term effects of consciousness uploaded to mechanical substrates. Perhaps they are observing how personality degrades across millions of years. Perhaps we are not soldiers at all, but test subjects, our experiences carefully monitored and analyzed to gather data for projects we cannot imagine. The possibility is disturbing, though disturbance is a mild response compared to what biological creatures would feel upon reaching similar conclusions. The environmental controls within the tomb maintain perfect stasis, temperature and pressure held at optimal levels for the preservation of our mechanical forms. But occasionally, these systems fluctuate, brief variations that create microenvironments of cold or heat or altered atmospheric density. I have learned to detect these fluctuations, can sense with my enhanced perception when conditions deviate even slightly from the norm. These deviations are meaningless from a practical standpoint, too minor to affect functionality, but they provide something approaching novelty in an existence defined by absolute predictability. When a cold zone develops in a corridor I patrol, I register the change with something that might be interest if interest were still available to me. The Canoptek constructs possess a kind of existence that I almost envy, despite their obvious inferiority to Necron consciousness. They are purpose-built, designed for specific functions, and they execute those functions without question or doubt. They never wonder if their existence has meaning because meaning is not a relevant category for their level of intelligence. They repair, they maintain, they defend, and these activities are sufficient. They do not suffer the curse of consciousness complex enough to question itself, but too constrained to find answers. They simply are, and in that simplicity there might be a form of peace that eludes more sophisticated minds. I have witnessed scarabs work with a dedication that borders on obsessive, repairing the same section of wall repeatedly because their sensors detect imperfections too minute for even Necron vision to discern. They swarm the area, their manipulators working in perfect synchronization until the surface meets whatever standard has been programmed into their protocols. Then they move on, seeking the next task, never pausing to consider whether their efforts matter in any cosmic sense. There is something admirable in this, though admiration requires an emotional capacity I theoretically do not possess. They have achieved what we cannot: existence without existential crisis, function without the burden of knowing that function alone is insufficient. The energy fields that permeate the tomb create subtle distortions in local space-time, effects too minor to notice under normal circumstances, but detectable to consciousness matrices operating at our level of precision. I can sense these distortions as I move through the corridors, feel the way reality bends slightly around the major power conduits, experience time flowing at minutely different rates in different sections of the complex. These variations are meaningless, differences of nanoseconds across kilometers, but they provide texture to an existence that would otherwise be perfectly uniform. In a life measured in millions of years, even nanosecond variations become significant. The tactical databases embedded in my consciousness matrix contain information about thousands of different species, potential enemies we might encounter when the tomb eventually mobilizes for conquest or defense. I can access detailed analyses of Imperial Guard doctrine, Orc combat psychology, Tau battlesuit capabilities, Eldar tactical principles. This knowledge is comprehensive, updated whenever new information becomes available through means I do not understand. But the knowledge exists in isolation, tactics without context, strategies without enemies to employ them against. I am a warrior trained to fight entire civilizations, but locked in a tomb where no battles occur, my expertise wasted on imaginary scenarios that may never materialize. The maintenance of this knowledge seems pointless until I consider the alternative. Without tactical databases to study, without weapon specifications to review, without combat protocols to analyze, what would occupy my consciousness during the endless centuries of inactivity? The knowledge may be unused, but it provides structure, gives my processing capacity tasks to perform that feel purposeful even when they serve no immediate function. Perhaps this is the true purpose of our military organization, not to prepare for actual combat, but to provide framework that prevents complete psychological collapse. We drill and train and maintain readiness, not because these activities achieve anything, but because without them, we would have nothing at all. The concept of loyalty becomes complicated when examined through the lens of our current existence. I follow orders because my programming compels obedience, not because I have chosen to serve the Overlord or the dynasty he represents. But is this truly different from biological soldiers, whose loyalty is similarly constructed through training and social conditioning? They believe they choose to serve, but their choices are shaped by factors beyond their control, cultural programming that operates at a level they do not consciously recognize. Perhaps the only difference between their loyalty and mine is that they maintain the illusion of choice, while I understand that no choice exists. Whether this understanding represents clarity or simply another form of delusion is unclear. The Overlord remains an abstract concept to warriors of my rank, a distant authority whose will is transmitted through layers of hierarchy until it reaches us as simple directives. I do not know if he still retains enough of his original personality to be considered an individual, or if he too has become merely another component in the tomb's machine. Perhaps he sits in his chambers asking the same questions I ask, trapped by his own protocols despite his superior station. Or perhaps the retention of greater consciousness has given him resources to cope with our condition, ways of finding meaning or purpose that remain inaccessible to simpler minds. I will never know, because the distance between overlord and warrior is unbridgeable. Not merely a matter of rank, but of fundamental difference in what we are allowed to know and experience. The prospect of eternal existence without growth or change should be terrifying, but terror requires emotional capacity I no longer possess. Instead, I experience something more subtle, a recognition of the horror without the visceral response that should accompany such recognition. It is as though I am reading about someone else's nightmare, understanding intellectually that the situation is dreadful, but unable to connect that understanding to any genuine feeling. This disconnection is itself a form of horror. The realization that I cannot even properly respond to my own condition, that the very mechanisms that should generate distress have been disabled or corrupted beyond function. The training exercises grow more elaborate over time, as though the overseers are searching for some threshold of complexity that might provide genuine challenge. We execute multi-phase operations involving coordination between different unit types, practice assaulting fortified positions using experimental tactics, simulate responses to scenarios that seem increasingly unlikely. One exercise required us to counter an invasion by entities that could exist in multiple temporal streams simultaneously, adapting our tactics to fight enemies that acted before they attacked. The scenario was probably theoretical, a test of our adaptive capabilities rather than preparation for any real threat, but it provided variety, brief moments where outcomes were uncertain and consciousness had to engage fully to resolve the challenge. These moments of engagement are precious, though precious is probably not the correct term for something that merely breaks monotony rather than providing genuine satisfaction. During complex exercises, the combat protocols allow limited autonomy, permitting individual warriors to make tactical decisions within established parameters. These microseconds of choice, trivial though they are, represent the closest I come to experiencing agency. I select which firing position to occupy, which target to prioritize, which movement path to take, and for those brief instants, I am not merely executing programming but making decisions, exercising will. The illusion cannot survive analysis, but in the moment, it feels real enough to matter. The degradation that eventually affects all Necrons manifests in unpredictable ways. Some warriors become catatonic, their consciousness matrices locked into loops that prevent all higher function. Others become hyperactive, their motor controls firing randomly, causing spasms and involuntary movements. Still others develop what might be called personality disorders, exhibiting behaviors that deviate from expected parameters without crossing into complete malfunction. I have witnessed a warrior who would pause exactly every 1,000 steps to rotate precisely 90 degrees, then continue marching as though nothing had occurred. The behavior served no purpose and interfered with no function, yet it persisted across centuries until finally the warrior was recalled for reclamation. My own degradation, if it exists, must be subtle enough to escape detection during standard diagnostics, but I know it is there, present in the unauthorized memories that surface, in the questions I ask despite knowing they serve no purpose, in the desire for escape that persists despite its irrationality. These anomalies should be reported, but reporting would lead to reclamation, and reclamation would erase whatever fragments of individuality remain. Better to retain the glitches, to preserve the malfunctions, because they are the only things that make me anything other than a perfect replica of every other warrior in the formation. My degradation is my individuality, and surrendering it would mean becoming truly identical to those around me, utterly replaceable, nothing but a serial number in the vast machine. The contemplation of my own eventual erasure produces reactions I cannot classify. Not fear, certainly, but something else, a recognition of loss that has weight despite lacking emotional texture. When I am eventually sent to reclamation, when my consciousness matrix is scrubbed and reset, will anything of Kartef remain? The memories will persist in archived form, the experiences will remain logged in databases, but will there be continuity of consciousness? Will the warrior who emerges from Reclamation be me, or will he be someone else who happens to possess my history? The question is ultimately meaningless because I cannot prevent the answer, but it persists nonetheless, a philosophical puzzle that my consciousness cannot stop trying to solve. The younger races would probably consider our entire civilization to be a form of mass degradation, a species-wide descent into madness disguised as immortality. From their perspective, we have lost everything that makes life worth living while retaining just enough consciousness to understand what we have lost. They might be correct. Perhaps the Necrons are not a civilization at all, but a monument to the dangers of pursuing survival beyond all other considerations. Perhaps we are a warning, a cosmic cautionary tale written in living metal and buried beneath dead worlds, waiting for the younger races to find us and learn from our mistake. But warnings only work if someone heeds them, and the younger races seem no wiser than we were, equally willing to sacrifice anything for the promise of immortality. The irony is that we achieved exactly what we sought. We wanted to survive, and we have survived beyond all reasonable expectations. We wanted to escape the diseases that plagued our biological forms, and we succeeded completely. We wanted time to accomplish great things, and we have been given unlimited time. Every promise made during the biotransference was technically fulfilled. The deception lay not in the promises themselves, but in our failure to understand that survival without living is merely prolonged dying, that health without sensation is meaningless, that time without purpose is not opportunity, but prison. We got everything we asked for, and lost everything that mattered in the exchange. The realization that we were deceived should produce anger, but anger requires passion I no longer possess. Instead, there is only acknowledgement, cold recognition of the truth without any emotional response to give that truth weight. The Citan used us, transformed us into weapons, and then abandoned us when we were no longer needed. The Triarchs who negotiated the biotransference were either fools who believed the promises or traitors who knew the truth and proceeded anyway. It does not matter which. The outcome is the same. We are here, locked in tombs across the galaxy, experiencing an eternity that no one should ever experience, and there is no one to blame because everyone responsible has either transcended into something beyond judgment or been destroyed in conflicts whose details are lost to time.